families in closed detention.
Well, Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. And before we get into questions, we might follow the usual practice of me making an opening statement, if that would be permissible to the Commission. Well, welcome to Parliament House, Madam President. I'm pleased that and welcome the opportunity to accept your invitation to appear at this public hearing today at this venue, and pleased to have been able to assist in making this venue available to the Commission and provide this opening statement and seek your indulgence in making that statement today. In appearing today, I continue what has been a comprehensive and cooperative engagement from my department and the many service providers engaged in the delivery of the government's policy in relation to immigration detention. I want to begin by commending all those men and women who work and serve in all of these organisations to provide services, care and support to those who are accommodated with immigration detention in Australia and offshore, especially children. I commend them for their professionalism and the compassionate and effective way they go about doing their very difficult job. These Australians take great pride in what they do for their country. They work in difficult circumstances, often under extraordinary pressure. They are subject to considerable scrutiny and regular and often unfair criticism. Despite this, they continue to turn up to work every day. They do their job to the best of their ability and provide care and support to a high standard that deserves our recognition and our appreciation. They have provided this service under governments of different political persuasions, under different policy settings, and that have had radically different results. As Minister, I will give an account for the policies and actions of our government over the past just 11 months. I note, however, that my four predecessors in this role from the previous government have not been invited to give evidence before this inquiry, nor during the 6 years they were in government, where they were subjected to no such inquiry by the Human Rights Commission. This is an inquiry into children in detention, as you've stated. However, it could be more accurately described as an inquiry into children Labor put in detention during their 6 years of failed border protection policies. I invite the Commission to rectify this situation by extending an invitation to my predecessors. Under the Abbott government, more children have been released from detention than are arrived illegally on boats and placed into immigration detention. The predominant reason why there are children in detention today is because they turned up on boats under Labor. Under the Coalition, 353 children have arrived in Australia on boats. That's too many. Under Labor, 8,469 children arrived on boats. When Labor came to office in 2007, there were no children in detention who had arrived illegally by boat. Yet by the time that Labor left office in September last year, more than 8,000 children had been put on boats, and record numbers of children had piled into detention, rising to a record 1,992 in just July of last year. Many others were not fortunate enough to make it that far. They perished at sea, and their corpses were scooped from the water by the men and women who serve as part of our Border Protection Command. In July last year, there were almost 50 people smuggling ventures. There were 33 search and rescue operations, more than one per day on average. 18 people lost their lives, including one infant. This was a shameful period. In the 11 months that we have been in office, there has been a dramatic transformation. The boats are stopping thanks to the combination of policies led by turning boats back where it's safe to do so, as well as offshore processing and denying permanent resettlement visas in Australia. Only one people smuggling venture so far this year has had their passengers reach Australia and be transferred into the custody of Australian immigration officials. As a result of the strong border protection policies of this government, all other ventures have failed, and all the passengers of the one venture referred to were all transferred to Nauru, consistent with government policy. There have been no deaths at sea this year. The number of children in detention, including in offshore processing, has fallen by almost 40%, or 537 children out of detention, from 1,392 in September last year to 855 today, including offshore. A further 150, as you noted, will be taken out of detention in the next few months as a result of our new bridging visa policy announced earlier this week that has been some months in the making, as I indicated to you at our last private meeting. This measure enables children under 10 and their families to be released on bridging visas by putting in place additional support and protections that will enable them to be more self-sustaining and resilient in the community. Children over the age of 10 were already being released into the community on bridging visas with their families. Not only are children being released from detention, we are closing children's detention facilities at Inverbrackie, Curtin, Darwin and Christmas Island, including the Aqua and Lilac compounds, as recommended by my Ministerial Advisory Council. These are all facilities that held children that were opened by Labor because of their border failures and are being closed by this government because of our border successes. We are also addressing service and infrastructure issues within the network and especially on Christmas Island. The Secretary provided you with a catalogue of these improvements at your last hearing. These include creche and play centres, refurbishment of accommodation and most significantly getting the children to school. It is true that under the arrangements made by the previous government, approximately 24 primary school-age IMAs at a time attended classes on a rotational basis for about 2 hours, either in the morning or afternoon. This was not good enough, particularly at a time at the last election when there were more than 400 children on Christmas Island. I'm advised that the shortage of teachers on Christmas Island was raised as early as April of 2013 under the previous government, yet no action was taken. I was made aware of the shortcomings on Christmas Island when I toured there late last year, and in follow-up reports from my Ministerial Advisory Council commencing in January of this year. I moved immediately to secure funding of $2.6 million through the budget process to provide education services to IMA children on Christmas Island, and I welcome your acknowledgement of that today. On 12 June, the Department contracted the Catholic Education Office of Western Australia to establish a learning centre at the Phosphate Hill Alternative Place of Detention. The Christmas Island Learning Centre has been separately fenced and clearly marked as a learning centre with appropriate infrastructure including play and recreation areas. Classes at the Learning Centre commenced on 30 July, something everyone in this room I know is very pleased about. Facilities are provided within our detention network to a standard equivalent to those in the community and in many cases far better. There are around 70 clinical staff on Christmas Island, including 25 alone for mental health for a population of around 1,000 detainees. Now, that's down from almost 2,500 detainees at the time of the last election. There is also an on-call paramedic 24 hours a day. You will sadly not find similar services in many rural and remote communities of Australia, especially for our own Indigenous population. This system is not without its faults, Madam President. There have been periods where the system has been exposed to tremendous stress, and weaknesses have been exposed. Some of those weaknesses have been the subject of testimony provided to your hearings. In each case, we have moved to address those weaknesses as they've been identified. In most cases, we've been able to move on and improve the situation, but the one response that has had the greatest impact to remove the stress on the system that creates these weaknesses and is to ensure that more people, and importantly more children, are not being added into the network by stopping the boats. There is much emotion in this serious topic that is before your inquiry. There should be. As a parent of 2 young children, the emotional challenges of working in this policy portfolio are just as real and just as great as they would be for any other parent in my position. But sentiment cannot be indulged at the expense of effective policy that is saving lives and ending the chaos and tragedy that was occurring that many thought could never be turned around, and that is my duty. At the last election, the Australian people decided that enough children had drowned to warrant a change in policy. This has been done, but not without cost. There will always going to be cost. There is no decision that I or any of my predecessors take as a minister in this area that is not free of moral burden. Our decisions affect people's lives. It is a heavy responsibility that no minister carries lightly, regardless of their political affiliation. Unlike commentators, as a minister does not have the luxury of an opinion for which there are no consequences. There are consequences and implications of all policies. However, those advocating policies should share in the responsibility, especially where they have been so successful in their advocacy. When Labor was elected in 2007, those advocating the abolition of the Howard government's successful policy measures on our borders got everything they wished for and more. As the consequence of those policies that they advocated became a noxious reality, as children filled the boats, filled the detention centres and many went to the morgue, those voices fell strangely silent in their criticism from the day the previous government was elected to the day it was voted out of office. They have now found their voices again after the election in their criticism of the government in relation to children in detention, as we seek to clean up the mess that has been made by the policies they claimed, and many still claim, are a viable solution. I prefer to carry the burden that accompanies the success of the policies that I have implemented as Minister, that is ending the deaths and the chaos, than the burden carried by my Labor predecessors and all those who cheered them on and advocated weaker border policies that imposed a deadly curse on our borders. That is their burden, however nobly motivated. Nobody, and especially nobody in this government, wants to see children in detention if it can be avoided. The aim of the Abbott government is to return detention centres to the position left by the Howard government, where there were no children in detention at all who'd arrived by boat, none whatsoever. And I'm sure we would all welcome seeing that again, and I know I certainly would. However, you cannot reduce the number of children in detention when every child you release into the community is replaced by another coming in on the next boat, as occurred under Labor. There are some 30,000 illegal maritime arrivals left behind by Labor. My aim is to introduce a temporary visa product as soon as possible, so far denied by Labor and the Greens in the Senate, despite the government's clear mandate for this policy achieved at the last election. That would enable this caseload to be processed. The absence of such a visa product at present also removes the possibility of considering alternative options for those currently on Christmas Island or elsewhere in Australia who arrived post-July 19. In closing, I want to emphasise the government's commitment to finishing the job we were given to do to resolve the issues for Australia and illegal maritime arrivals. Governments are elected to take the lead on these issues, and the Australian people have made it very clear that that is what they expect from this government. But on many occasions, and again today, I reiterate that I will always take advice from external bodies and experts in the field who have something genuine and constructive to add to the work that we have already done and will continue to do. I look forward to your report, Madam President, and will provide whatever assistance I can today, as we have so far to date. It will fall to you to review the testimony and endeavour to objectively determine the facts as you have said, and assess the credibility or otherwise of any claims made, whether those claims are current and ongoing, and whether claims have been substantiated before drawing any conclusions. As a distinguished lawyer, you will know that an allegation or assertion made does not amount to clear evidence simply by its statement. My department has dedicated considerable resources, and I thank them for their support to your Commission of Inquiry, to comply with requests and provide the inquiry with information and respond to the many issues and claims made during the course of this inquiry. I welcome your offer to submit a draft of your report to the department to address any issues of fact, and it is important, obviously, that sufficient time is provided to the department to provide that feedback, which I'm sure will be forthcoming. Thank you for the opportunity to make an opening statement.